welcome back, folks. It is now the 19th, and this is day 2 of being a little smoggy here. So we are kind of seeing a combination of fog and smoke from the fires in BC, which is kind of slowing down photosynthesis a bit. Hasn't been a whole lot of crop development the last couple days here with all this smoke. Especially corn is going to almost halt development without sunlight. But these peas, I had thought they were going to be ready for desiccation earlier this week, but you can see we do still have a fair bit of green in here, so we're still a ways away. That those rain showers we had 2 weeks ago have basically caused new growth and more flowers, so we're going to have to wait a little bit longer before harvest yet. Well, as dryland durum, for the most part up here by Barron's, is still kind of in milk stage. There's still a lot of liquids in the heads, and tillers are continuing to grow and develop. So I'm sure this field will stay green for a while in here, but only if it gets enough moisture. Well, irrigated barley is now coming into soft dough stage and is really good to go for silaging. We got some good starches built up in here, and the kernels aren't hard yet, so good time to get her done. Well, the canola is sure looking a lot different this morning. Last week this field was in final blooms, and now it has the appearance of being in full bloom again, and that is because it is all new growth from those, little half-inch showers we got 2 weeks ago. Now the canola has put out new buds and new side stems and is reflowering, so we will see if it has enough moisture to fill things out. You can see, like on this plant here, the main stem here has some decent sized pods, but it terminated early when it ran out of moisture, and now we have all these side branches full bloom. Oh, here's a particularly rough looking durum field. This one, there is some new growth going on at the bottom as it tries to tiller out, but for the most part it's so stressed it's pretty much done. These heads are tiny, but they are trying to fill. They are in milk stage now, so they're looking, I mean, it could be worse. There could be nothing there, but man, this weather is so weird today. It is now high noon, and the sun is basically just a red dot in the sky. It feels like it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's only 17 degrees out. Well, I'm back in this canola by Barron's. It's having heavy grasshopper pressure along the edge. The pasture and graze land over on the west side is still continuing to burn off and dry down, driving the grasshoppers across the road into this green canola. The rest of the canola field is actually not too bad. I mean, it has 20 bushel potential, so it is worth protecting. And now after 3 weeks, that coregen is pretty much worn off. There is still dead grasshoppers on the ground, but not nearly like I was finding last time. So you can see some corpses here. Oh, here's one here that's actually in the process of dying at the moment. So it is still working, but I think we'll come in and hit it with the light rate again. This kochia is awfully nice and green and tender. I wish they would just eat it. Well, here's some peas that are at a really good desiccation timing. There's pretty much no grass green left. Just a couple of these little areas here. They're kind of lime greenish. So we're going to come in here in the next day or two probably and get this sprayed with Regulon Ion. Well, we got some weedlage going on here. This field last year was actually kind of like a cover crop annual forage system that got wiped out by kochia. And so we put Roundup Ready canola in there to try to get some of the weeds under control. But between drought and gophers, we had a very, very poor catch of canola. It would have probably at best been a 2 or 3 bushel canola crop, so it is now being silaged along with the weeds and the lamb's quarters and everything else, and then we're going to spray it out and seed some fall rye in here. Now up here by Carmen Gay, you can see all the main stems are pretty much finished flowering and are in full pod development, but all that new growth from the showers a couple weeks ago, you can see very, very heavy abortion on these stems. There's very, very few pods being set, but they sure are trying to flower, so the field still looks like it's in final bloom. Here's another field of canola that's about 2 miles away up in Carmen Gay. This field was over threshold several weeks ago for insects and was never sprayed, and now you can see the volume of ligas that's in here. It's mostly young instars as well as blister beetles in here, but the number is 10 times over threshold. So these guys, as they mature, will definitely cause losses to those pods. Okay, I know this camera isn't great at macro, but you can see on these pods here where feeding has been. There's lots of little holes and feeding sites in the outside of these pods as these lygus are attempting to feed on these guys. So some of these pods will probably be compromised and won't stand up to straight cutting or even swathing as they mature to that point. I was just coming down the road and I see a chemical jug sitting on the road, so I thought I'd stop, and sure as shit, it is absolutely full, and this is ATP kinetic boron, so really good product. And you know, a jug of this ain't super cheap either, so you know, make sure your loads are secured when you're driving down gravel roads, because you might just lose what you paid for. Taking this with me in case I find out whose it is. Well, judging by these fresh sprayer tracks here, my oats by Colhurst have just been sprayed not too long ago, and you can see these pigweeds are already going limp and starting to go down. They're not looking all that healthy, so you can see on this lamb's quarter especially, so it looks like the Enforcer M is doing its job so far. We should see more results next week. Well, the winter wheat down by McGrath is really ripening up in a hurry. We're definitely now in that hard dough stage, so these kernels are starting to dry down, as little as there are in each head. So in the next week or so, this is going to dry down to the point where we can get in here and harvest, and hopefully it's before the grasshoppers take it. Well, this field of dryland canola down by McGrath is doing pretty well. She's now completely finished flowering. Bugs still aren't a problem, and you can see we got pretty decent pod set in here. Are they the biggest, juiciest, fattest pods I've ever seen? No, but they're pretty decent. But the variability in this area, just like a lot of other places in southern Alberta, is pretty crazy. I mean, this field might well do 30 bushels to the acre, and not even a mile away is another field I'll show you. So over there at the top of the hill is right where that canola was I was just looking at, and right here is the same variety about a mile away, and you can see it is nowhere near as good. It does have pods developing on it, but they are much fewer and far between, not developing quite as well. So that's just the difference that different available submoisture will do for you. Well, if you guessed last week's weed was curled dock, you were correct. Once it gets a bit bigger, this is the seed heads that you generally see on it. It's a relative of the buckwheat family, so it is kind of a triangular seed. You can see those stereotypical leaves down here at the base. So this is what it looks like once it gets bigger and in the flowering seed development stage. So this week, let's do something a little harder. All right, here's a little bit harder of a weed for you this week. This one most of you cattle producers will know, but maybe many of the rest of you do not, and I'll give you a hint. It is 3 words long and it has yellow flowers. Well, in this winter wheat, I was noticing there's the odd stem is laying down on the ground there, and when I start pulling them up, sure enough, you can see right here we do have some sawfly. You can see there's some sawdust in the stem there, so that was sawfly. Typically grasshoppers will not cut them off down low like this. Grasshoppers will chew the head itself off, so if you see the whole stem laying over, that is likely either a disease such as a root rot or a crown rot like Fusarium, or it could be sawfly. Well, I got a customer called, their pivot is stuck over there, so I'm going to fly my drone and we're going to see if we can figure out why exactly it is stuck, because there's nothing more miserable than slugging through irrigated tall canola shoulder high to try to figure out what's wrong with your pivot. So hopefully this will save them a little bit of work. It's a little windier than I usually like to fly, but we'll give her a try. And there is our problem. We have a tire that has come off the rim. So that'll be fun to get a new tire in there. Well, the peas down here by McGrath are starting to turn pretty well. They're pretty consistent, especially compared to some of the peas farther north that I've seen in the last week. The individual plants kind of vary, but there is still some pretty green, soft pods here. So these guys are going to have some pretty soft peas in them yet. But there is also some more yellowy pods in here as well. So once again, I recommend watching the video that was done last year by Brant from Syngenta. So that's going to be up here again. Well, I've come down south here to take a look at where this big hailstorm passed through along the US border here a couple weeks ago. So you can see this cereal field is regrowing. It is pretty much completely wiped out. This looks to have been barley and is definitely a 100% loss, but there is some regrowth on it, but realistically that'll never get combined. And here you can see the canola was hit equally as hard. It was completely stripped down. There is a little bit of regrowth going on the bottom, but that's not really worth anything at all. You can see some areas starting to flower, but it'll never do anything. Well, here are some lentils. These guys were just flowering when they got hit by the hail, and you can see they've actually regrown pretty good, and they're actually just starting to flower again. Now, the odds of them actually producing anything before frost is somewhat slim, but a man can hope. Well, here's another field of canola that was particularly hard hit. This is about 2 miles away from the first one I showed. And as you can see, it was pretty much mown right off to the ground. This hail came down for about 15 minutes. Apparently it was fairly small, but the 80-90 kilometer-an-hour winds that accompanied it basically just sawed everything off to ground level. And this particular farm, I just talked to the farm boss, and out of 8,900 acres, only 900 acres is left standing. Oh, here on the edge of this cornfield, you can actually see where grasshoppers were feeding on the odd leaf here and there. Not of economic concern really, but interesting to see nonetheless. Some of these hoppers are getting pretty big. Well, this corn here is now slightly over 1 lisle tall and has not tasseled yet. I think we'll get tassel emergence in this field here next week. This is a little bit of a later variety of corn, but it is sure looking really good for now. Now here's one of my favorite views. Wide planted canola with precision planter. This is 24-inch rows on irrigation. Always really cool to see down the rows like this, and it makes it quite easy to get in here. I mean, you have to crawl around your hands and knees, but to scout for blackleg and sclerotinia in an irrigated canola stand, this is so much easier than the 8 or 10-inch row spacing. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.